Okay, listen. Listen. I know you guys want me to go outside. And I know. It's looking nice out there. It looks beautiful. It's not happening. Alright, next time, I promise. Look at how fucking smoky it is out here. You guys want me to record when the fucking earth is on fire? Canada's on fire? Look at this, dude. I don't even know if you can see it, but it's fucking crazy hazy. Canada's on fire and you want me to record in the smoke? No, I'm just gonna smoke a cigarette in my room. Alright, alright. Did you guys miss me? Miss me? Ooh, center frame there. Not in a gay way, did you miss me? It's alright, guys. It's not gay or anything. It's alright, guys. There's nothing gay about it. We're back. Going on. Egyptian cigarettes. Yeah. Like that? That's all we smoke, man. That's all we smoke. I only smoke cancer teeth squares. Alright. Let's jump in. Canada's on fire. We don't like those fucking Canucks anyways. How we doing, guys? Is this shot okay? Are you seeing enough of my beautiful face? Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Get that a little higher. Put you on top of Julius Evola here. Alright, guys. We got chapter, I think it's, what do we got here? 7 and 8. And then I'm going to do a chapter, I'm going to do a video about chapter 9 all on its own, because chapter 9 is one of the greatest things I've ever read. It's beautiful. Alright, how's this doing? Are we doing alright? Sorry, I just want to make sure the ladies get a good view. Alright. I had to do the bedroom. Canada's on fire, the world's on fire. So, we're in here again, I'm sorry. We'll be outside next time. Alright, chapter 7. You guys remember where we were. I've been awake for 15 hours at this point, but you know I've been working a lot, so this is all we got. This is the only time I got. We're shooting this right now. I know you guys have been missing Guénon. Alright, chapter 7. The usurpations of royalty and their consequences, okay? Royalty usurping the spiritual powers isn't good. Sometimes it's said that history repeats itself. This is false, Guénon says. That's bullshit. For there cannot be in the universe two beings or two events, strictly alike in all respects. If there were, there would no longer be two, but since they would coincide in everything, they would merge purely and simply in such a way that there would be but one in the same being or one in the same event over and over, right? And Leibniz called this the principle of indiscernibles. I'm not a Leibniz guy. Go read that if you want. But he points that out. Moreover, the repetition of identical possibilities implies the contradiction, supposition, of a limitation of universal and total possibility. Okay, right? If things really did repeat, there would only be so many events that could happen in the world, right? That's bullshit. We know that. So, you know. It is this also which allows us to refute such theories as reincarnation and eternal return. Okay, he says reincarnation is fucking garbage, man. I don't believe that shit. Nietzsche, eternal return. Amor Fati. Yeah, I have that tattooed on my... I was 18, it was stupid. I'm 30 now. Yeah. Okay, Amor Fati, eternal return. Bullshit, Guénon says. Bullshit. But another no less false opinion, which is quite the opposite of this one, is the contention that historical facts are entirely dissimilar. Okay, that's bullshit too. And that there's nothing common among them. The truth is that there are always dissimilarities in certain respects and similarities in another. And that, as there are different types of beings in nature, so there are, in this domain as in all others, different types of facts. In other words, there are facts that are the manifestation or expression of one and the same law in diverse circumstances. Like there's one internal truth. Okay. Very good one. Now, in reality, there is never identity between different periods of history, but there is correspondence and analogy. Just as there is between the cosmic cycles or the multiple states of being, and just as different beings can pass through similar phases, with the one reservation, that there are also modalities proper to the nature of each of them. So too can peoples and civilizations. Okay? Do we get this? Do I need to explain this? It's pretty easy so far, right? But despite the great differences, then, there is, as we have shown above, an incontestable analogy, perhaps never sufficiently remarked upon before, between the social organization of India and that of the Western Middle Ages, okay? That is fucking disgusting. Alright. This correspondence is nonetheless of the greatest importance because it serves to show with particular clarity that all institutions presenting a truly traditional character rest on the same natural foundations and in the final analysis differ from another only by the adaptations required by varying circumstances of time and place. So what is he saying here? He's saying, now, externally, the societies built on tradition may look different, right? But he's saying this is only a result of the changing nature of temporality, right? Things change over time. So the outward appearance of a society 800 years ago that is traditional, still going to be built upon the same type of metaphysical foundations as a society 2,000 years ago that was built upon tradition. But obviously due to changes in whatever fashion, time, language, culture, technology, they may appear differently. Except for one culture, which we'll talk about, right? Which culture is that? Which one is that? Alright. We also find in Europe, beginning with the Middle Ages, in an analog, I know I told me ANA and then it flipped the page, analog to the revolt of the Kshatriyas. Remember the Kshatriyas, the warriors? Remember, it hasn't been that long, guys, right? I'm sorry I've been gone for a little bit. We talked about Heidegger last time, but we're back. Kshatriyas, you guys remember those guys, right? Particularly in France, where from the time of Philip the Fair, Philip the Fair, who must be considered one of the principal authors of the deviation characteristic of the modern epic. Okay, Philip the Fair, this guy, listen, you had me at Frenchman, he's already a piece of fucking shit, but you learn more about him. It's even worse than just being French. He's a fucking bastard. Alright. Royalty worked almost continually at becoming independent of the spiritual authority. They did, and that was bad. While conserving, however, by a singular illogicality, the outward sign of its original dependence, since, as we have explained, the anointing of kings represented nothing else than this. Long before the humanists of the Renaissance, the jurists of Philip the Fair were already the real precursors of modern secularism. Now, I do not know much about Philip the Fair, and just because I speak French doesn't mean I know much about French history. I should probably know more about this. But French people suck. France is gay. French is gay. And Philip the Fair is gay. So, this was around the 14th century, so the 1300s. So around the 1300s, French people ruined Europe, is basically what going on is saying. Seems right? You know, if you would have asked someone maybe in the 11th century, if you were going to ask a European, like, okay, which group of Europeans is probably going to ruin Europe, most people would say the French, right? So this is not something that should blow our minds. French people fucking suck, right? Okay. If you're French and you're watching this, you fucking ruined it, you fucking frog. We think that the starting point of this rupture was marked very clearly by the destruction of the order of the temple. If you thought that, you were stupid. We shall only recall that this order was a kind of link between the East and West, right? And that in the West itself it was, because of its at once religious and martial character. Religious and martial character, remember that. Okay, that's going to be important later, okay? Such a link also between the spiritual and the temporal, even if this double character must not be interpreted as the sign of a more direct relation with the common source of the two powers, okay? One may be tempted to object that even if this destruction was deliberately desired by the King of France, it was at least implemented with the agreement of the papacy. But the truth is that it was imposed upon the papacy. Okay, Guénon says all those people blaming the Pope, you're fucking stupid, he's saying. Stop it. But the truth is that it was imposed upon the papacy, which is sometimes altogether different. By thus reversing the normal relationship, the temporal power henceforth began to use the spiritual authority for its own ends of political domination. We talked the last video about, what was the name? The dependency of the royalty on the priesthood, why it was so important that royalty had the priesthood. But now we're putting it in the historical context. This isn't just theoretical anymore. He is saying that this destruction of the temple, this link, may have seemed the beginning, you may have thought it was the Pope, but actually it was the King of France, right? Once again, okay, desired by the King of, once again, these French fucking pieces of shit. These fucking rat bastards. Where's my e-cig? I don't want to smoke another cigarette. We're only doing a couple smokes a day. Right now we're smoking vanilla custard, fucking goy juice. Vanilla goy juice, oh yeah. Alright, one might doubtless object further that the fact that this spiritual authority let itself be subjugated in this way proves that it is no longer what it should have been. Okay, listen. You're saying, okay, well, the spiritual authority must not have had that much power if it was going to be overthrown by some fucking French pieces of shit, right? True. Fair. But the spiritual authority, listen, the spiritual authority wasn't going to get down on that grindball shit, okay? That French people were going to get on, okay? The Catholic monarchs weren't going to be, or the Catholic priesthood wasn't going to sink down to the level of these frog fucking tranny bastards. Alright. And that its representative, okay, it proves that it no longer what it should have been and that its representatives were no longer fully conscious of its transcendence character. This is true. Okay, maybe I was wrong. It was true, actually. Guénon says that shit was true, actually. It even explains and justifies Dante's sometimes violent invectives against the clergy of his time. But the fact remains that in the relation to the temporal power, they still represented spiritual authority. And that it was from this authority that the temporal power derived its legitimacy. Okay? It's no longer legit. Spiritual authority can and must always control the temporal power, and that it cannot itself be controlled by anything else, at least outwardly. Okay? However shocking such a statement may seem in the eyes of our contemporaries, we do not hesitate to declare this but the expression of an undeniable truth. Okay? So to our modern eyes, this may seem shocking, right? What do you mean? The spiritual authority must control the temporal power, aka the politicians, the king, the whatever. So in our eyes, in our liberal, progressive shithole, apparently we would rather be ruled by secular Zionists, and in Minnesota, I guess we'd rather be ruled by Somalians than spiritual authority. I guess Minnesotans have decided, in particular Minneapolis, has decided that letting Somalians rule your city and letting their military-age fighting men rape children and sell drugs in your city, much better than having some kind of spiritual authority over you, apparently. Disagree. Hard pass on that. I am gonna be moving out of Minneapolis in the next couple months. I can't take this anymore. Grew up here really poor. It wasn't really my choice, but addict parents and all that. So supposedly liberal modern Europeans have decided that letting, I think it's Edina or Eden Prairie, has some Somalian woman ruling the city as mayor. The lady left during the 4th of July to go back to Somalia, so that's what we get, right? We get Somalians. Oh God, please, Fuhrer, save us. This is what we get, man. Well, America, you wanted to fight World War II, right? That was worth it, right? Remember when you killed all of our German friends? Now you get to be ruled by Somalians who rape your children. How's that going for you? Good? You guys liking that? You loving that? Alright, we're going to return to Philip the Fair. Philip the French fucking shitbag, who for our present purpose furnishes an especially characteristic example. It is instructive that Dante attributes his actions to cupidity, which is a vice not of Kshatriya, but of Vaishya. And that's the Indian term for merchants. So in the Indian caste, you know, same with the Western, he's going to draw these parallels, but In tradition, the four social classes essentially are, the spiritual authority, political authority, and then you got merchant class, and then you got the worker class, the so on and so forth. The agriculture class, the workers, whatever. He's basically saying Philip the Fair, he wasn't acting like a warrior, he was acting like a fucking Jew, is essentially what he's saying, okay? He's acting like a merchant, acting like a banker, acting like a J. What are you gonna do? Some of these people do these things. We could say that when they enter the state of revolt, the Kshatriyas, as it were, degrade themselves. They lose their own character, and taking on that of a lower class, it's fucking disgusting, dude. You used to be a fucking warrior, now you're just a fucking merchant. You're just a tiny hat wearing fucking merchant, dude. You decided to throw away the spiritual authority, and now you are a fucking merchant. Okay, how does that feel, man? How does that feel? You liking that? You feeling good? Could have been in Hyperborea. Now you're a fucking Jew. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about that, Philip the fucking Fair? I'll piss on your fucking grave if I ever go to France, but I won't, because I don't want to be stabbed by a fucking African, okay? Now listen, they're lower class now. It's fucking disgusting. It may even be added that this degradation may inevitably accompany the loss of legitimacy. If by their own fault the Kshatriyas are deprived of their normal right to exercise of temporal power, it is because they are not truly Kshatriyas. You're not even Kshatriyas anymore, you're just Jewish. By which we mean that they are not of a nature any longer to fulfill what their proper function was. Without spiritual authority, you don't even have the function of a Kshatriya anymore. You're just Jewish, buddy. Alright. If the king is no longer content to be the first of the Kshatriyas, that is to say the head of the nobility, and to play the regulating role to which he is entitled as such, he loses what essentially constitutes his raison d'etre, and at the same time opposes himself to the nobility of which he is but an emanation, and as it were the most complete expression. Thus, we see royalty in order to centralize. Okay? You hear that? This is important. I'm going to repeat that. Thus, here we see royalty in order to centralize and to absorb in itself the powers that belong collectively to all the nobility, enter into a struggle with the nobility, and work relentlessly towards the destruction of the very feudal system from which it had itself issued. It can do so, moreover, only by relying on the support of the third estate, which corresponds to the Vaishyas, the Jews. And this is why we also see precisely from the time of Philip the Fair, the King of France, beginning to surround themselves almost continuously with the bourgeois, especially Louis the Ninth and Louis the 14th, okay? French pieces of shit, both of those guys, the 9th, the 14th, fuck out of here, who pushed the work of centralization the furthest, the bourgeois, moreover, later reaping the benefits of when it seized power during the revolution. What they are saying is, the more the Kshatriyas, put this down for a second, the more the warriors tried to revolt against the warriors, the royalty, remember the Kshatriyas, whatever you want to call them, the temporal power holders, they said fuck you to the priest, right? They did that, and that wasn't good. Maybe it was good, I don't know, we'll see how the future goes. Maybe the Kshatriyas needed to revolt so we can have a pagan revival. I don't know anymore. Who the fuck knows anymore? I'm just vibing through the storm. They had to rely on the bankers, right? In order to centralize more power. Basically, they relied on bankers and bourgeois to, buy out the feudal system under them, right? They had the feudal system under them. They bought it out, destroyed it, centralized all the power. And I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but they're even going to try to centralize the power of religion, right? Turn these into state religions, forms of control. All right. French people, listen, man. It's not good, dude. This isn't good. Alright. So, let us add, temporal centralization is generally the sign of an opposition to the spiritual authority, the influence of which governments try to neutralize in order to substitute their own. Okay? like I just said, they're going to substitute it their own, the state religion. Okay, so I already said that. The modern epic, which is that of rupture from tradition, could be characterized from a political point of view as the substitution of the national system for the feudal system. And it was in fact during the 14th century that nations began to form through the agency of that centralization we just spoke of. It is right to say that the formation of the French nation in particular was the work of its kings. But in doing this, they unwittingly prepared their own ruin. No good. The formation of nations is essentially one episode in the struggle of the temporal against the spiritual. And if we want to get to the root of the matter, it may be said that this is precisely the reason why it proved fatal to the monarchy, which even at the moment when it seemed to be realizing all its ambitions, was only rushing to ruin. Basically what he's saying is, when nations were formed, we used to just have Christianity, right? Europe was just Christendom, Catholicism. It's just sacred geography, right? Geographically, this was the Christian domain. Eventually, the royalty, the Kshatriyas, revolted, and the ground no longer became sacred geography, it became national geography, right? This isn't good. What he's saying is the formation of the nation states was just a historical representation of the revolt. And I guess you would probably say World War II was when, I don't even remember the name, the Vaishyas, the whatever the fuck, the merchants, the Jays took over. The Vishyas, whatever, the Vishyas, Vaishyas, whatever. I'm not Indian. Thank God. Thank God. Not Indian. Let's go. Let's go. Thank God. Whew. It's a close one, boys. Alright, listen. I think he's going to say what I just basically said, but there's a kind of political and a unity that implies a disregard, if not the denial, of the spiritual principles. That alone can establish the true and profound unity of civilizations and nations are examples of this. During the Middle Ages, there existed throughout the West a real unity based on properly traditional foundations, which we called Christendom. But when the secondary unities of purely political, temporal, no longer spiritual orders were formed, the West was irredeemably broken and effective existence of Christendom came to an end. Okay, I kind of just went over this. Is there anything I didn't say here? Okay, this is interesting. Given the very conditions of their origin survive only by opposing each other. Okay, nations can only survive and grow by opposing each other, right? And ceaselessly contending among themselves in all the fields. Sorry, I was looking at something on the camera and it kind of threw me off. This is why the idea of a League of Nations can only be a utopian one with no real significance, right? Because the national form is essentially hostile to the recognition of any unity superior to its own. Okay, so basically what he's saying, if a nation couldn't be succumb to spiritual authority, why the fuck would it succumb to a League of Nations? Okay. The European Union, which is just a bunch of fucking bankers, yeah, bunch of fucking Jays trying to tell Europe what to do, it's never going to work, okay? Maybe work in these last 80 years. Britain already left. We see, you know, not that that's going great or anything, but we see people are trying to leave this shit because it's not going to work out. Nations started because they didn't want to get told what the fuck to do, so I don't know why a bunch of fucking Jays after World War II thought that they were going to now control the nations of Europe. We'll see what happens. It seems to be working so far, but things change. Life changes. Nothing's fucking static. Alright. Now, spirit is unity. Matter is multiplicity and division. That's important. Okay, very important. And the more one removes, you even see, you even see when people in America base their identities upon materialistic things like politics, music, movies, things. You know, we have these beautiful Christian households and now they're getting torn apart by differences in politics, differences in fucking sports teams. Dude, you could see a family get ripped apart because some fucking fat piece of shit likes a different sports team than some other fat piece of shit. This happens in America. If anyone in Europe is watching this really fucking happens. I'm sure it happens in Europe too. Your faggy cousin roots for the other team of African soccer players and the other team of African soccer players, and it's just all hell breaks loose. It's not good. The more one removes itself from spirituality, the more antagonisms are accentuated and amplified. No one can deny that the feudal wars, which were quite localized and subject, moreover, to restrictive regulation by the spiritual authority, were nothing compared to the national wars that have resulted, following the revolution and the Napoleonic Empire in armed nations. Okay, and we have seen in our own day new developments hardly reassuring for the future, right? And he's pretty sure this is written, I know, yeah, because he died before World War II, I think, started. So this has to be pre-World War II. He did not see the quote-unquote nukes. If you think nukes are real, that also might be a fucking psyop and a mind trick. I don't fucking know. It is weird that Hiroshima and Nagasaki weren't even in the top. I don't even think they were the top 5 destroyed cities in Japan during World War II. That's odd. Yeah, it's looking like this was 1929. So this he did not live to see World War II. So he just knew. He's just a smart fucking guy, that guy. On the other hand, though, the establishment of nations made possible actual attempts to subjugate the spiritual to the temporal. This subjugation found its most definitive expression in the notion of a national church that is once subordinated to the state and confined within its limits. Church of England. Some fat fucking piece of shit in England wanted to get divorced, and so the Church of England wanted. I mean, I don't know if his wife was a cunt, but probably was, but you fucking ruined our fucking cultural glue, buddy, over some cunt, really? You're the fucking king. If you already want to sin and divorce a woman, you might as well just cheat on her. Why did you even need the divorce? Must have really been a fucking cunt, dude. You're the king. Imagine being the king. You're the fucking king. And you're still being nagged so fucking hard by this bitch. You literally have to create your own church just to divorce her. Can you imagine that, dude? You fucking, oh my god, dude. Am I running out of, why does it say that? Am I running out of fucking memory on this thing? Hold on a second, guys. Okay, sorry, it was telling me my SD card was running out of battery, so I think I deleted that. Hopefully I didn't lose anything there. We're going to find out when I'm editing on my laptop. Alright. God, it is so fucking hot in here, guys. It is 90 fucking something degrees outside right now. I have fucking AC on, it's still so hot in here. Alright, this fat fucking piece of shit divorced his wife, King Louis, I think that was his name, King Henry, whatever the fuck. Fat piece of shit, divorced his wife, Church of England, social order, state church. This idea of a national church first appeared in Protestant countries, or to be more exact, it was perhaps above all to realize this idea that Protestantism was instigated, for it seems clear that Luther was hardly anything more, at least politically, than an instrument of the ambitions of certain German princes. Heavy charge there. He's basically saying Martin Luther was nothing more, and all of Protestantism was nothing more than a political tool of German princes, maybe. And it is moreover quite likely that if the revolt against Rome had taken place without such a support, its consequences would have been quite as negligible as many of those short-lived incidents of dissent. Maybe. I honestly don't know enough about Protestant history. I don't know what German princes he's even talking about. So, but this is Guénon, right? Would Guénon lie to you guys? Its individualistic tendencies were not longing and turning back upon them, for they were directly preparing the way for democratic and egalitarian conceptions characteristic of the present epoch. But as one sinks deeper into materiality, instability grows, and changes take place more rapidly. Thus, the reign of the bourgeois will be relatively short-lived in comparison with the regime that preceded it. Furthermore, as usurpation calls forth usurpation, it is now the Shudras, those are the workers, okay, the workers, who follow the Vaishyas the Jews, the merchants, and aspiring for domination. Okay, so now the workers and the fucking Jews are getting together. This is the significance of Bolshevism. Okay, this is Bolshevik communism. We do not wish to formulate any forecasts here. Remember, this is 1928 he's writing this. Released in 29, but he's probably writing this in 28. We do not wish to formulate any forecasts here, but it would not be very difficult to predict from the preceding remarks certain consequences for the future. If the lowest social elements come to power in one way or another, their reign will probably be the briefest of all. And it will mark the last phase of a given historical cycle, since it is not possible to descend any lower. And even if such an event were not to have wider implications, one may suppose that this phase will be at the very least for the West the end of the modern period. Good, right? Good. Good. Before we go to the next chapter, so let's go back to what he said just at the end of the last page right there. This will probably be the briefest of all, right? And if his I mean, we don't know when this communist Bolshevik reign will take over the West, but let's say it happens in the next 20 years. He's saying it's going to be the shortest of all. So if let's just say it started in 2045, that would mean World War II, maybe World War I. The bankers took over. That would mean it was a 120-year reign. Maybe it'll be 60 years. It's going to be the shortest of all, he said. So maybe the Bolshevik reign will be just 60 years of fucking hell on earth, my guys. How's that fucking sound, right? That sounds great, right? Alright, 60 years of Zionist hell on earth. How does that sound, guys? 8. The terrestrial and celestial paradises, okay? The political constitution of medieval Christendom was, as we have said, essentially feudal. It found its consummation in a function that was truly supreme in the temporal order, that of the emperor, who has, with respect to the kings, what the kings were in turn to their vassals. It must be admitted, however, that this conception of the Holy Roman Empire remained somewhat theoretical and was never fully realized. Okay, it's not good. Maybe it is good, I don't know. Doubtless through the fault of the emperors themselves, who, misled by the extent of the power conferred upon them, were the first to consent their subordination to the spiritual authority, from which, however, they held their power even more directly than did the other sovereigns. What is more interesting is to understand that the emperor ought truly to have been, and also what could have provoked the error that led him to mistake his relative supremacy for absolute supremacy. Okay, so we want to understand what made the emperor think this. The distinction between the papacy and the empire originated in the way from a division of powers that in ancient Rome were united in a single person. Okay, this is good. This is where it gets good. Okay. Since during that period the imperator was at the same time Pontifex Maximus. We got a note here. Guénon finds it remarkable that the Pope has always retained the title of Pontifex Maximus, the origin of which is so obviously foreign to Christianity and moreover greatly anterior to it. This fact being among those that ought to illustrate to anyone capable of reflection that so-called paganism had in reality an entire different character from that usually attributed to it. Okay, what these Catholic pieces of shit say about pagans, most of it's garbage, and it's mostly revisionist history of them trying to make pagans look bad. They will steal the name Pontifex Maximus for their Pope, who's crying in Europe right now about how Europeans should take in more Islamic fucking rapists to rape their children. That piece of shit somehow still got the name Pontifex Maximus while they're talking shit about pagans. And while these Christian faggots are on the internet trying to tell you that Christianity took nothing from paganism, right? This is what they try to tell you, that Catholics took nothing from paganism? Okay, sure. Why don't you go back to calling your Pope what the Roman people called their empire, you fucking pieces of shit, and import some more fucking Islamists. Alright. But we do not think that it is necessary in this special case to inquire how that union of the spiritual and the temporal is to be explained. For this would risk involving us in some rather complex considerations, right? Okay, it's pretty complex. We stole everything from the fucking Roman pagans. It's pretty complicated for the Jews, for our Hebrew God. The Roman emperor appears in a way as a Kshatriya exercising, in addition to his own function, that of a Brahmin. Hold on, before I make the joke. Which seems something of an anomaly. What is that? And so one ought to inquire whether the Roman tradition may not have a particular character that allows us to consider this as something other than a mere usurpation. On the other hand, it may be doubted that the empires were for the most part really qualified from the spiritual point of view, though a distinction must sometimes be made between the official representative of authority and its actual holders. It's enough that the latter should inspire the former, even if he is not one of them, for things to be as they ought to be. So what is he saying? Sounds like to me he's saying that the Romans may have had a special character where they could be warriors and spiritual class at the same time. Evola will talk about this. He will talk about our Hyperborean tradition was originally one of martial and spiritual character, right? No other race could pull this off. You know why? Because we're fucking goats, man. We're just really that fucking good. It's just really fucking crazy. Alright, we really are that fucking good. There really is a reason that they spend so much fucking money to try to push us down, man. But he is also saying, within Roman society, perhaps just because he held the title of spiritual authority, that there was perhaps people behind the scenes, right? And we know, at least in Greek culture, there was a higher spiritual class. I'm more familiar with Greek and Nordic culture than Roman culture, to be completely honest. But I don't know. Maybe there was people behind the scenes, or maybe we're just the fucking goats, man. And we could handle both at the same time, Kshatriya power and Brahmin power. Maybe that's just the fucking reality of the situation, man. All right. The Pope and the Emperor were in any case certainly not the two halves of God, as Victor Hugo wrote, but much more precisely the two halves of the Christ-Janus figure. Okay, here we go. Which certain representations depict holding a key in one hand and a scepter in the other. Emblems, respectively, of the priestly and royal powers, united in this figure as in their common principle. Oh my god, fuck it. Okay, this symbolic symbolization of Christ with Janus as the supreme principle of the two powers is the very clear sign of a certain traditional continuity, too often ignored or deliberately denied, between ancient Rome and Christian Rome. And we must not forget that in the Middle Ages, the empire was just as Roman as the papacy. But this same figure also explains the error we just pointed out, and which was the proof fatal for the empire. This error lies in brief in regarding as equivalent the two faces of Janus. These are indeed so in appearance, but when they represent both the spiritual and the temporal, cannot be so in reality. Okay. So what is he saying? Obviously what he said a million fucking times. It's a mistake to think that these are two things of the same coin. Bug just flew in. It's not. It may appear like that outwardly, but the spiritual power is even in the Christ-Janus connection of Rome. The spiritual authority was always above, and one was subordinated to it. Alright, here we go. At the end of his treatise, De Monarchia, Dante very clearly defines the respective powers of the Pope and the Emperor. The key passage is this. Twofold there are the ends which unerring providence has ordained for man. The bliss of this life, which consists in the functioning of his own powers, and which is typified by the earthly paradise, and the bliss of eternal life, which consists of the enjoyment of that divine vision to which he cannot attain by his own powers, except they be aided by the divine light. And this state is made intelligible by the celestial paradise, okay? These two states of bliss, like two different goals, man must reach by different ways. For we come to the first as we follow the philosophical teachings, applying them according to our moral and intellectual capacities / virtues. And we come to the second as we follow the spiritual teachings, which transcend human reason according to our theological capacities. Virtues, faith, hope, charity, all these things. Okay, faith, hope, charity, these are the good spiritual values. Though these two goals and their ways are made plain to us. The one by human reason, which is as it is used by the philosophers, makes all these things known to us. The other by the Holy Spirit, which through the prophets, through the holy writers, through Jesus Christ, the Son of God, co-eternal with the Spirit, and though his disciples has revealed to us whatever supernatural truths we need. Yet man's greed would keep them from us. We're not men like horses. The fuck was that? And their animal vagaries, kept on the road by bit and rein. Thus the reins of man are held by a double driver according to man's twofold end. One is the supreme pontiff, who guides mankind with revelations to eternal life, and the other is the empire, who guides mankind with philosophical instructions to temporal happiness. And since none are very few... Okay, there's a fly in here now. God damn it. The Jays are sending fucking fly drones into my room to stop the video, guys. They do that shit. Can reach this goal. Unless a free mankind enjoys the tranquility of peace and the waves of distracting greed are stilled, this must be the constant aim of him who guides the globe and whom we call Roman Prince, in order that on this threshing floor of life mortals may exist and in peace. So what he's saying, what is he saying? He's saying that the emperor's goal is to keep the people happy in the temporal space, right? The temporal space with philosophy. The emperor's goal is to distribute philosophy to the people to get them to temporal happiness. But temporal happiness is only so much. Terrestrial happiness is only so much. So there's also this other truth, which the spiritual class was to disseminate amongst the people. The spiritual values, right? Faith, hope, charity. These aren't material values. These aren't philosophical values. They're more spiritual values. He has a whole text. He talks about he has a whole text. Dante's Esotericism. Probably a good book. Probably won't cover it on the channel. So if you're more into Dante, you want to read Guénon talking about the esotericism of Dante more, go for it. That's a good book. Go read that. Dante is surprised that, Guénon is surprised Dante never became an enemy of the Pope, but Guénon says that is because Dante was smart enough not to criticize the Pope, because he realizes that the Pope is just a representation of an institution. He's just a man. He's not the institution himself. Which Guénon says modern man really doesn't know how to do that, right? They always apply individuals to the identity of the institution. Which also, just we've talked about this before, he said it was Martin Luther's problem, right? It was Martin Luther said the whole church was broken just because a few people were doing penance, what were those things called? Whatever. Where people were selling passes, like fiscally were selling passes saying you won't have to spend time in purgatory, or we can take away your sins fiscally. That's pretty much what led to the Protestant Reformation, as you know, and bad, he says. The emperor presides over the lesser mysteries. We've talked about the lesser mysteries in the old videos. I think it was video 2, which corresponds to the terrestrial paradise. That is to say, the realization of the perfection of the human state. Okay? The sovereign pontiff presides over the greater mysteries which concern the celestial paradise. That is the realization of the suprahuman states, joined thus to the human state by the pontification function, understood in its strictly etymological sense. So, the terrestrial equals the natural, the celestial equals the supernatural, okay? And he wants to repoint out that, he repoints out here that you see the connection between India and medieval Europe. He's kind of wrapping around and saying, see, I fucking told you. Look at, I told you. I told you. The first of these two functions being accomplished according to philosophy, with philosophical instructions to temporal happiness, and the second according to revelation, with revelations to eternal life and eternal happiness. It goes without saying, of course, goes without saying, but he's going to say it anyways, that philosophy cannot be understood here in its ordinary and profane sense, for it were it to be too obviously incapable of playing the role assigned to it. To understand what is really involved, we must restore the word philosophy to its original significance as understood by the Pythagoreans, who were the first to use it, right? Philosophy is thus only a preliminary and preparatory stage, a step towards wisdom, just as terrestrial paradise is a stage to celestial paradise. So, philosophy could be called human wisdom, which comprises the sum of all knowledge that can be attained by the faculties of the human individual. Dante synthesizes as reason, for it is this that truly defines a man as such. But this human wisdom, because it is only human, is not true wisdom, and which, identified with metaphysical knowledge, is essentially super-rational and thus also superhuman. So real wisdom is celestial, it's super-rational, it's superhuman. So in the case of all knowledge that surpasses the human state, do the individual faculties become powerless and other means become necessary. And in it precisely here that revelation intervenes. That is a direct communication from the superior states, which is, as we have said, effectively established by the pontificate. This revelation is possible because of the existence of faculties transcendent with respect to the individual. And whatever may be the name one gives to them, whether one speaks, for example, of intellectual intuition or of inspiration, it's essentially the same thing, right? He's just saying, I don't even have to explain that. He's just saying it's essentially the same thing. Revelation, inspiration, intellectual intuition. This feeling we have in our being that tells us to do something. It's all the same thing. All right, we're getting there, guys. We're getting there. Basically, real quick, this next paragraph, just to once again show how it's the same between the West and the East. In Hindu doctrine, it was called Shruti and Smriti. Thank God I'm not Indian. All right, philosophy was the Shruti, and revelation was the Smriti. Maybe it was the other way around. I don't know. I don't speak Indian. Thank God. Okay, these two keys in Janus, of Janus in ancient Rome, Jamie, pull up a picture of Janus, were one of the attributions of the sovereign pontiff, to whom the function of hierophant or master of the mysteries essentially belonged to, and of course the title Pontifex Maximus. We now understand even more completely than before why these two keys are at the same time those of spiritual and temporal power. The relationship between the two powers must be expressed by saying that the Pope can keep for himself the golden key to celestial paradise and entrust the emperor the silver key to the terrestrial. Okay? You guys got it? Getting this? This is all clicking. How we doing? How we doing out there, guys? Alright, this next part, for pretty much page, he re-goes over chapter 4 of Crisis of the Modern World, where he goes over sacred and traditional sciences versus profane sciences. And I already did a video on that. I'm pretty sure it's part 1 of Crisis of the Modern World. Just go back to that. Goes over some more stuff, not necessarily super important. Some kind of cool Greek symbolism of the Voyagers, why Voyagers in our symbols are so important. Basically, I'll just go over this. The figure of navigation was used in Greco-Latin antiquity, in particular the expedition of the Argonauts in quest for the Golden Fleece, the voyages of Ulysses, and the works of Virgil and Ovid. And this image is also in India sometimes, and it's also used by Dante. And in this passage from the Shankaracharya, some kind of Indian word, the yogi, having crossed the sea of passions, is united with tranquility and possesses the self in plenitude. The sea of passions is obviously the same as the waves of distracting greed. And in both texts, it is similarly a question of tranquility, the symbolic voyage indeed representing the acquisition of great peace. Obviously, this great peace can be understood in two ways according to the terrestrial or celestial paradise. In the latter case, being identified with the light of glory and the beatific vision, okay? And while in the former case, it's peace, human peace properly. Okay. Rest of this isn't very important, but this part is important, okay? And this is where we're going to end the video. At this point, we reached the moment in history when the darkest period of the Dark Age was to begin. Characterized in all orders by the development of the most inferior possibilities, and this development, ever advancing in the direction of change and multiplicity, was inevitably to result in what we see around us today. From the social point of view, as from all others, instability is, as it were, at its maximum. Disorder and confusion are everywhere. And humanity has surely never been further from the terrestrial paradise, from primordial spirituality. Must we conclude that this alienation is final, that no stable and legitimate temporal power will ever again rule the earth, and all spiritual authority will disappear from this world, and the darkness spreading from west to east will forever hide the light of truth from man's eyes? Well, if such were our conclusion, we would certainly not have written these pages, any more than we would have written any of our other works. For on such an hypothesis, the effort entailed would have been futile. Our remaining task is to say why we do not think so, which will be the last chapter. Chapter 9, The Immutable Law. I will have that out in a couple days, guys. Peace the fuck out. I really hope everything's going good for you guys. I really do. I know it's hard out here. I really hope the best for you guys, man. I really hope you're keeping your heads up. You guys have a good night, okay?